it's weird. There's all like almost like different versions of the internet is how I think of these things. Like when I think of things like the ag layer, the elastic chain or whatever, I think of those things as like internet of blockchains. And then what you're talking about is like an internet of security or an internet of restaking. All right, well, Altan, can you give maybe some background on how you got involved within the crypto space and kind of what started your journey into, crypto as a whole?
Yeah, so I'm Altan. I grew up in Turkey, which is an interesting state, almost like a nation that is quite unique in a sense for crypto. But I'll get to that. So I studied computer science in undergrad. I was pretty into simulation. So my work in research while I was 19, 20 was always looking at like how does virtual reality and simulation work. So I started looking at like avatars, and then suddenly found myself when I was doing my master's, deep learning was taking off, which is essentially like the subfield of AI, where all the transformers and everything are deep learning models. I found myself for some reason still going back to simulation. So I was studying robotics, and even though I could have done anything like language and other things, I was like, how do you sort of train a model in a simulation and then take that to real world without any training in the real world? That's called zero-shot learning. So yeah, it's been quite interesting, like virtual reality, linking that actually to deep learning and robotics. Always kept myself in simulation, and suddenly found myself again in a simulation, whereas like crypto as a concept is just like fully on the internet. Money is digital, and you see yourself like people building incentives around money digitally. So so ended up like questioning and trying to learn about crypto in 2022. I think actually 2021. Found myself pretty into like how to write smart contracts. So I started from I learned about blockchain, how blockchain systems work, and then I went up and said, hey, let's just try to write some smart contracts on Ethereum. It was quite tough at the time. And by the way, Starknet was also reading Cairo. There was like a bunch of stuff. So I knew this programming language called C++, which is kind of like very similar to Rust in a sense, like where Solana and Near are coded. And then I found myself jumping into like pretty much to Near just because like I loved Rust, and I was like, oh, I want to build smart contracts on this platform, and suddenly ended up at a hackathon. And after I won the hackathon, Near Foundation was like reached out to me and said, hey, we need someone technical to join a team, but it's just not going to be just writing programs, but also for business development. So yeah, like coming back to from Turkey, growing up, like spending a lot of time with simulation, and then suddenly I looked back. I'm going to link back to Turkish lira and inflation. There's a lot of people in Turkey that hold digital assets because, well, there's no value in lira. Like holding lira always goes down in terms of value. And then essentially people hold two things or three things, right? Which is like gold, dollars, and Bitcoin, right? So that was kind of the linking back, not only from a intellectual perspective, but also culturally being aligned with the values of crypto.
How high is the inflation in Turkey?
60. So it saw like 100-ish. So it saw like 80-ish like reported. But family members were like, it's definitely more than 100, right? Every time you look at a price, the price goes up.
Like 100% a year?
Yeah, it's almost percent. Yeah, like it's seen that probably, but they did not report it that way.
Wow, that's crazy. So that's like the equivalent of like if you had $1,000, at the start of the year, by the end of the year, that $1,000 is worth essentially $0.
Yeah. Currently it's like 67%, but yeah, you're right. Like it's $1,000 would be worth $500 by the end of the year. Yeah, because it's two.
That's crazy. So wait, that's cool that you have like some experience from that viewpoint. And so you're saying people are holding dollars, they're holding Bitcoin, are they holding like stable coins too?
Yeah, basically. So I would send like, if I'm sending money back home, I tend to send it through USDC because it's just easier. Like it settles immediately. But as well, like people in these economies, like people tend to be more speculative because, you need to make money, and the way to make money is to go through like, these like high risk assets anyway, because you have nothing to lose.
And when you say high risk assets, you're talking about Bitcoin. So like they'll put their money into Bitcoin hoping to make money as like
everything. My centralized exchange market is like I think it's in top 5 for Turkey.
Okay, well, from a developer viewpoint, what are you most excited about in crypto right now? When you look around, you look at what's being built. What gets you really excited about this space right now?
Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, there's two things, right? There's more programming languages now. It's not only Solidity. I think Solidity as a it's easy to learn, but it's easy to mess up writing smart contracts. So then Rust is a pretty robust language that you see it across like being used everywhere outside of crypto. And nice that like Solana and Near are kind of like have that natively built in, and like you can write Solana programs in Rust. And the other thing is quite interesting, which is kind of almost like a derivative of Rust is Move, right? Like you see Move chains coming up, Sui and Aptos, and then you have like obviously, I think Movement L2 will bring that VM to Ethereum. So those are interesting from like purely smart contract perspective. And then you'll go up, which is I think we talked about in our podcast. Like everyone can launch a chain now, right? So you have obviously like OP Stack, Arbitrum, and others that are pretty like abstracts the way to launch a chain. And then you go pretty much from there to you can go to like a Caldera or like a Conduit, and then just tell them like, hey, deploy me a chain, and you pay them like there's some you still need to pay for an OP and ARB chain, but it's improved a lot, right? So when we started in the space, Cosmos SDK versus where things are, I think it's a bit of an improvement. So those are the two things I'm excited about. And then obviously we talked about chain abstraction. I honestly think it's still a concept, like and intents are there with the cross and other ones, and bridges are obviously been there. But I'm curious to see how developer experience with chain abstraction evolve, right? Like you will have like maybe you just ping a chain and then like it deploys it everywhere. I think there's some examples of that with Agoric. And yeah, the fourth thing is like I'm excited that restaking is just not taking off. There's a lot of people that want to build AVSs on Eigenlayer and Babylon. And so there needs to be some sort of, again, evolution that happened with like blockchains, L1s. You'll see the same thing with restaking. Developer experience, DevOps, and everything will improve there. So yeah, I have a lot of sort of different perspectives, but that's kind of wraps it up.
Do you think, it just popped in my head when you're talking, do you think that in the future it will kind of people laugh and look back at like back in the old days? When an app on Ethereum or, I remember one day on Polygon, I was like trying to do a transaction and it kept having trouble. And I was like, what's going on? And it was like, oh, there's a really popular game on Polygon and it's, causing the chain to have issues. This is like way back in the day. But I also remember like on Ethereum, like, anytime there was an NFT mint, it's like gas prices would skyrocket. And do you ever think like maybe in the future people look back and be like, yeah, back in the day, everyone had everything on like the same chain. It was weird. And, because in the future, everything will just have its own chain and those chains will be connected.
Yeah, I mean, depends how we solve that problem. If we're able to solve that nicely and, you're able to not, when you're bridging, you're actually not seeing that you're bridging, then people will be happy and just say, hey, like everything is cheap now, like everything's a commodity. Like I'm happy that I can jump around Arbitrum to OP to somewhere. If that experience sucks, I think people are going to go back and say, oh, remember the good old days that we can actually do everything on a unified layer. And people had...
And that's the maybe bull case Solana. That's like where Solana's like... Whew,
which I tend to agree with both worldviews, right? I mean, Near is a sharded blockchain, which exactly does what you said, right? The difference between Near and Solana is like, I guess Near is asynchronous. So like, I think Solana is synchronous as far as I know. But essentially, like all the transactions the transaction you send could go to another block, right? And then you can get like a sort of a callback, which is essentially just saying, "Hey, this happened, and by the way, execute this thing." So yeah, I like both worldviews, but my perception has always been my thoughts or my views are not the market view. So market evolves in the way that it wants to evolve, right? So, yeah.
I think people have always thought like maybe a blockchain would be like within itself, like Ethereum was the internet of the future or something like that. And I think what we're coming to realize is like blockchains aren't quite that. And it'll be more like, I think in the future, the concept would be kind of like, I think of AOL. Where imagine if the internet would have evolved it maybe a different way, where Amazon, Facebook, eBay, they're all on the same website and they have to share the same resources, and how like annoying that would be. And it's a website that has to be built to like be generalized for all of them, so it's not really good for any of them. That's kind of how I think, versus hyper specialized websites. I think in the future, with blockchains, we'll have again hyper specialized blockchains that are very specific to whatever app's being built on them. Would you agree with that, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah,
on
interesting. I mean, the problem with internet is that everybody uses like the same similar protocols to communicate, like HTTPS, all of that stuff. That thing actually doesn't value accrue, right? Like the value doesn't live there, which is, I think it's a bit of a like, blockchains are different, right? If people build on Ethereum, everybody uses ETH to pay for gas fees. Thus, Ethereum gets value accrual. And then, yeah, I guess like that's my thought. And the other thought is like, in real, like in Web 2, Amazon, Google, all of these value accrue because they basically, like, they're building on top, but they have made very easy services. And then you come in and you get locked in because they give you free credits, which is kind of like airdrops if you think about it. And then they lock you in, and then suddenly you're so ingrained in AWS that you can't even leave. So you have to pay them, right? So, and then they are kind of like this middleware, right? So middleware applications come in. Obviously, some apps like value accrue, like Facebook and like Instagram and TikTok have done a great job. But the main like chunk that makes money is this AWS machine that like captures everything, and then doesn't leave anything to the kind of like the lower layer of the stack. Crypto has examples of everything, I think. Like we'll see apps more.
Yeah.
But like L1s, if you look at if you look at the market cap today, like top 200, it's predominantly L1s. Right? It's still not changed. L2's a little bit, but you see the dilution that happens from Ethereum to go up to Ethereum, like to L2. But yeah,
I think most of those L1s. So you mentioned like where's value accrual. The more I think about it, the more I feel like the blockchain itself will have very little value accrual, and that it's actually like, especially when you think of ETH. I think ETH, even though everyone makes fun of it, ETH as a monetary asset, as money, is actually where it's going to get the majority of its value, because it's exported to all these different chains and used as money, and that like the blockchain itself will, maybe if there's enough to burn, like that has economic value, but itself, like I think a lot of these L1s will maybe not go to zero, because cryptos don't tend to go to zero even when they're dead. But essentially a lot of them will die off, because it just makes sense that like it's the value is going to accrue at the app level. Like the apps will have the value, everything under it will get commoditized, and there will be, minimal value there.
Would you say Cardano has value accrual, or Cardano blockchain has a value accrual?
I would say Cardano is basically a meme coin.
Yeah, but it has value
accrual.
It's like 12 billion or something, right?
Yeah, I think Cardano gets a lot of value because people don't understand crypto, and so they think Cardano is an ETH killer. And so they, have kind of bought into that narrative, and they keep buying it, and it's like sustained itself through that. But no, I've never used an app on Cardano.
Me neither.
Never once.
Never once. Yeah, interesting. Okay.
Cool. Well, hey, I wanted to jump into Nuffle. Okay, so you founded this thing called Nuffle. What is Nuffle?
Yeah, so Nuffle is an interesting story. So actually, it's a project that's spun out of Near core teams. So Near core teams are Near Foundation and Pagoda. Pagoda is like the labs team. Pretty much like this started, I would say, last year, August. So we started like, we looked at Near's tech stack and said, hey, like what is really useful for this sort of growth of layer twos and other blockchain growth, right? So, and when we looked at the tech stack of Near, like it's a sharded blockchain. And one of the interesting things about sharding is, well, you need to solve the data availability problem, which is like, if a shard goes down, the data of that should be available in other shards so that you can reconstruct that shard, right? So that's kind of like if something happens with failure. So we said, oh, okay, well, actually, we can expose this quite easily to other rollups. So it's just like, we built a very basic smart contract on Near, and then an RPC and a light client, which is RPC is just like where you send transactions. And then light client is just to prove that data is available. And then we just shipped it, and we had like good reception from from Ethereum folks. Like, you know, a lot of, you kind of see now like Solana folks and others kind of doing the same thing, where, you know, you expose Solana as a DA layer. That had good reception. We have like one mainnet customer that's in top 20, which is called RSS3, that does like it's like they call themselves like the value layer. So you can build applications using RSS, which is the core protocol that people use for feeding information. And then while we were doing this, like EigenLayer was taking off, and we said, look, like there's going to be this like fragmentation that's happening in Ethereum. And there are two approaches to this where, you know, cryptographic approach is the AG layer, right, from Polygon. And that's essentially just saying, hey, you know, we have the ZK technology that we're very good at, and we're going to just prove every L1, L2 and give that to a one layer where people can build like applications on top. The way we did it is quite different. Hey, like Ethereum has tons of cryptoeconomic security. Why don't we just grab that and run sort of like dump every sort of state to like near DA, and we can take everything from near and then do pretty much like do X state, right? To give that to people to build cross-chain applications. So those two projects, we built it on near, and eventually we start to see kind of like, you know, one of the criticism towards near has always been near does too many things, right? So it does like AI, it does chain abstraction, it does modularity, it's all of that. So since we kind of built these projects, we're like, actually, you know what? We can build this as a separate project. Still has a link to near as like its sort of home, but it doesn't have to be on near, right? So it can work with everybody else. And it was kind of a strategic move, but also like when you're actually talking with rollups, it's nice to talk with Nuffle Labs versus like the Near Foundation, because Near Foundation is an L1 like foundation versus somebody else who's like a bit of a kind of like service provider, really. So yeah, we took that step in March, and we spun out of Near. So I'm the co-founder. I'm CEO, but CEO is a meme in a small startup. We're 6 people. Raised 13 million from like led by Electric, and just taking it right now step by step. And we have a third product that we can talk about, you know, closer to the end, the problems that we see in restaking and how we're trying to solve it. So yeah, TLDR, it's a spin-off from Near. A lot of Near folks, like 4 out of 6 is still Near like ex-Near employees, I would say, but we still have a close relationship to anybody who's Near aligned, like Near Foundation, you know, like Adia and others. So we build pretty much modular solutions for everyone. That's what we call it.
So you have 3 products. One I don't know about, but 2 of them. One of them is near, or not near DA. It'd be Nuffle DA.
No, it's near DA.
And then
it's literally just like it's literally near DA. Like literally, it's the thing that we built while we were at Near.
Okay. So one's near DA, and the other one is the Nuffle fast finality layer. And I want to get into each. First, though, near DA. So how would that maybe like people I think are familiar? Most people are familiar with Celestia at this point. How would that be different or the same as Celestia? It's just like hey, we're the same thing as Celestia, but like a different option, or does it have like distinguishing things about it?
Yeah, thesis behind is quite interesting. So Celestia is an L1. It's built for like, it only has, I mean, on modularity you have like 4 different components, right? So you have settlement, which where the final transactions happen. You have execution, which is like executing the transactions. You have data availability, you know, where the transaction ordering lives and other validators come in and prove. And obviously that's consensus, right? You basically have, you basically say, hey, this is the final state, and everybody agrees on that. So Celestia builds like pretty much DA and consensus in one blockchain. It doesn't have execution. And in our case, we said, you know, there's a lot of L1s. They all solve the data availability problem. Why not use like Near's DA for rollups? So it's kind of like, let's just not build a new blockchain. Let's just use something that exists and kind of modify it to, which is a lot easier to build in L1 because Celestia started in 2020. And then they were building that blockchain for 2 years. We built that actually in like 2 weeks, right? So because it's like exposing DA to other rollups. The benefit of this is like, obviously Near protocol has been running since 2020. So you using like a network that's been live for a while. It is a top 20 asset, right? So it's like it has enough crypto economic security to sort of to hold data for rollups. And the thing is, like, it's way more high throughput as it stands. So like Celestia's currently is like 6 megabytes per second. Obviously, they're changing that in the future. But as it currently stands, we have a 24 megabytes per second data availability throughput. So you can push like a lot of like rollups in there. And yeah, so the other one is cheaper, like, because Near doesn't have a gas fee market, so you can't front run people. Doesn't, like, MEV is very small, so it's like way a lot cheaper than Celestia, almost like 1,000 times cheaper than the call data, not the blob data. So call data is the traditional way to push data availability. But one of our customers, like RSS3, saw they were paying to call data like $1,000 a day. Now they're paying like $10 or $5 to $10 a day for Near. So it's a good, like, they were about to pay like $365K per year to almost like nothing, right? It's like $3,000-ish, which for a crypto startup, it's not that much money.
Real quick, I just want to pause there so I can kind of make sure I got a grasp of it. So for the average person, so they understand, data availability is basically just think of it as like a really expensive thing on Ethereum. It got cheaper with blobs, right? So that was a whole thing to make it cheaper. But it's really important for security. Okay, just think of those two things. Really important for security, and but really expensive from Ethereum. So these alternate layers have popped up. Celestia is probably the most well known, where you can say, hey, instead of posting my data availability to Ethereum, I'm going to post it over here to Celestia, and that's fine. That's totally fine as long as Celestia is secure. If Celestia has security issues, it goes down or something, that would really hurt you as a chain. So you don't want that to happen. And so what you guys are providing is an alternative to that. But you're saying, hey, like, Celestia is a newer chain, but Near's been around for a long time now. It's like it's weathered a few storms. And so instead, you can post that DA on Near. So like, this isn't like a really necessarily a separate thing. This is on Near the blockchain. And so if Near the blockchain went down, yeah, you'd be screwed, but you have a less likelihood of that happening because Near is, like I said, it's weathered some storms. It's been around for a little bit. Is that a pretty good explanation of how it works?
Yeah, I would say. I mean, it's a top 10, like one of the top 10 proof of stake blockchains, right? If you look at top 20. So like,
yeah, and I think something most people don't recognize about Near, because not talked about as much as it should be, is that Near handles a lot of transactions. Like, it has 2 of the most used apps in all of crypto are on Near, maybe even 3, but 2 that I'm aware of. There's Sweat Economy, and then there's
it's Kaiching. Yeah, Kaiching. Yeah, that's true.
Kaiching. Yeah. Really heavily used apps. We just don't get enough attention in the crypto space. So, okay, so you continue. I just want to explain that so people could follow.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, so it's battle tested, it's cheap, it's highly scalable. So let's just use DA for Near rather than using for Celestia and others. So that's kind of been the first push. But the problem has always been, like, we were part of Near Foundation. It was small. You can't put your own strategy. Like, we were based, like, you can't drive it yourself. I mean, Near is a pretty big org at this point and becoming a bigger organization. So if you sit in Foundation, it's kind of hard to push your own strategy. You need to go through a couple of different, I mean, this is what ends up happening with bigger companies is, like, you have to go through hoops, and even if you want to get an approval, it takes some, like, long amount of time. So we said, let's have our own small team, go lean, and it's been actually working pretty well, I would say. Like, there's a lot more announcements coming on that front. So that's Near DA pretty much.
Okay, that's a really good explanation. And I was just thinking, because there's a lot of DA solutions that are popping up. There's, like you mentioned, some people are building DA solutions on Solana. There's Akin DA. Polygon has a DA solution that I know about, and I'm sure there's tons more. But I think maybe your unique advantage would be that, like, yes, you could build a DA solution on Solana, but Solana legendarily goes down, occasionally, right? It's not as often as it used to be, but it does occasionally go down, and that could present a big issue. You could build it on something like EigenDA, which I think is pretty awesome. But again, it is newer, and there's less historic, maybe battle testedness. And so you guys really fit this really unique battle tested area, I think, that gives you an edge over probably everyone else.
Yeah, I mean, we love it. I mean, we love Near. this is design space that we know. That's where we're like, the first thing we can do is like, oh, let's just do something there. But I agree. That's kind of the mental map of like why you should use like Nuffle or NearDA, right? So that's kind of where it is.
Okay, so what about the Nuffle fast finality layer? What is that?
Yeah, so it's built on top of NearDA actually. So we first started like, hey, the problem with Ethereum. So let's start with the problem statement, right? So the problem with Ethereum is that if you're posting data or like, if you finalization takes like 12 minutes on Ethereum. So for withdrawals and deposits, so if you want to move money around L2s, you actually have to wait like 12 minutes to kind of move that money around. So with that, like there was this new, obviously I said, there's a new primitive, which is eigenlayer where eigenDA sits in as an AVS, which is sort of like an app on eigenlayer. Like the AVS is a fancy name. It's just like it's like an app on eigenlayer. We're also an app on eigenlayer, but essentially what ends up happening is since a lot of people, so RSS3 is currently posting blobs on Near, and there will be way more sort of blockchains posting their data to Near. So we thought, okay, so before it finalizes on Ethereum, we can actually use this eigenlayer and use restaking to say, since we already have the sequence finalized, like on Near, we can take that and say, hey, this is going to be the state that's going to happen on Ethereum, and all the eigenlayer validators that opt in to our AVS agree to that state. So we give that state to you, let's say to Jesse, who's trying to build a cross-chain app between RSS3 and OP, let's say, because the beauty of this product is it's a sidecar to the sequencer. So that means it doesn't have to change the sequencer's implementation. As long as you can see the sequence from not only RSS3 that's like posting themselves to Near, but also OP that doesn't post really to Near, but we can actually take it and dump it to NearDA ourselves. And then essentially Jesse can build a cross-chain app that does something on RSS3 blockchain and does something else on OP. And that finalizes around 3 to 4 seconds. So you can build that interaction in like 3 to 4 seconds. And the security you get is obviously not the full-on Ethereum security, but it's the eigenlayer security, right? So it's any of these restakers that kind of, it's called like replaying the blockchain, that replay the blockchain, does something incorrectly, they get slashed on Ethereum.
Okay, so I'm trying to understand it, and I might have the complete wrong mental model for this, but is this something kind of like ICP and Cosmos, or no?
No, it is pretty much like it's like earlier confirmation that this transaction or like this blockchain has finalized on Ethereum before, like with some eigenlayer security. So because you'll have to wait, like you'll have to wait 12 minutes. So if you're moving assets around between chains, because Ethereum has not finalized, so it takes 12 minutes to do that. People talk about pre-confirmations, which is essentially just saying L1 validators, like Ethereum L1 validators, agreeing to the state of an L2 before Ethereum finalizes, because they see the sequence before it actually goes through, right? So our case is like, since you'll have the sequence on Near, which finalizes in like 2-3 seconds, let's use that. Let's design an eigenlayer app where, everybody sees this sequence and everybody says, hey, this is actually the state of the blockchain. And then, eventually we'll settle on Ethereum. But it's almost kind of like a pre-settlement. And you can use this with, you can use pretty much this state to do anything, right? So you can do like withdraw money, you can build bridges on top, you can build like a game application that's deployed onto 2 different blockchains, and if you have to move money around or send a message around or whatever. So, but the beauty of this is like you get some eigenlayer security.
Okay, I'm gonna try to explain it back, and you tell if I'm way wrong or right.
Yeah.
Okay, so imagine 2 people, and they're doing like a contract. One guy's like, hey, I am pledging that I am selling my house to another guy, right? And there's a witness, right? And this witness typically would like look at these guys and say, okay, I witnessed the pledge. And then they have to run all the way back to the village and they have to record it, okay? What you're saying is you're building something where essentially there's another guy there who's got a phone. And he sees it, texts a separate village, and they record that it's happened. And you're saying, hey, you guys can move forward. You don't have to worry about it. We've recorded there. That guy will get back to the village eventually. That's Ethereum. And get recorded, but we already have, everyone else can like look at this text that came out and like say, hey, we're good to move forward.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like it's like, yeah, there's someone, it has to go to the record at some point, but we say, but that guy is also, your trust model of that guy is not the same as going to the village and recording it fully, right? So that's
correct. Yeah.
You have some, obviously you still have some like eigenlayer security and Ethereum security, but it's not like the same. It's not like Ethereum finalization. That's the trade-off you're making. Like it's the full-on trade-off.
Yeah, maybe the original guy that runs the village is like the royal scribe, and this other guy is just a lowly peasant, right? He's just like a normal peasant that's become a merchant, and he like does this stuff, right? But he doesn't have the royal decree behind him, so it's not as official. But you can trust it enough because of this guy's reputation, etc.
And there's a couple of guys, I guess. There's a couple of guys, right? There's not one guy. There's like
guys.
20, 50 guys that like, there's operators on Eigenlayer that just say, hey, this is correct. Hey, this is correct, right? And then all of them agree to a consensus, which is like a small consensus algorithm.
Okay, what does this enable? So what like for the average user, or maybe for apps, or whatever, what is this going to enable that we couldn't do right now?
Yeah, so there's a lot of, well, it's not a bridge, right? So it's not like one party that does like the confirmations. So when you're using like, let's say layer 0 or like others, like there's kind of like a quorum of people that layer 0 picked and said, hey, these, please like hold the gates between two of these blockchains, right? So this is more like, hey, Ethereum operators agreed to give this money to these operators that they run the software. And if we do something correct, we're going to get slashed on Ethereum. So that doesn't agree currently on, like that doesn't exist on the bridging paradigm. The other thing is like some of these bridges are pretty slow, right? So if you're trying to go from Wormhole, like from Solana to Ethereum or others, right, it takes sometimes like, I don't know, I've seen 1 or 2 minutes. And if you have a messaging protocol, obviously you can build apps on top. But essentially what you can do is you can design a gaming interface. Let's say Jesse has a game, wants to deploy to OP and ARB. You deploy the same contracts and you rely on this mechanism to, let's say that game did something in ARB, wants to grab an asset and wants to put it in OP. You can trust this protocol to kind of do that in 3-4 seconds. So for the user, they don't see that like they're an OP and ARB. They just see one game. And obviously it doesn't take as fast as like using Arbitrum as its own, but in a chain fragmented world where there's things lying around and you want to use like something on, let's say, Blast and want to do something on OP and wanted to do it on a full one front end, this makes sense, right? You just basically build a cross-chain app that finalizes in 3-4 seconds, and people don't see that it's using a bridge or anything, and it has some Ethereum security at the back.
Got it. So for cross-chain interactions, apps, etc., this would be a layer for building and enabling those types of things.
Yeah, or it could be like a centralized exchange because you have to wait, like let's say 12 minutes for Ethereum to finalize. If it's a small transaction, you kind of want to trust something and immediately move money around. This makes sense, right? Basically, like let's say Binance wants to move OP to ARB, like 10 or like $100 or even like millions, right? You can trust this because you're going to get slashed if you lie.
Or even with, would it be the same with something like cross-chain intents, where you have like the solvers on each end? Maybe they could use it and say, hey, okay, cool. I know the transaction is going to get here. It's going to take time. And this allows me to, on my, because with intents, they're basically like loaning their money before it comes across. Would it be maybe a solution for them as well?
Yeah, it's similar. I would say it's like it's a bit like it is. It's almost like competitive to intents in a way, right? So that's.
Oh, okay. So maybe a different route for intents. Okay, that's interesting. You mentioned a third product that had to do with AVSs. What's that?
Yeah, so we basically, when we started like building these things, so NearDA is almost like an AVS on top of a Near, right? So it uses Near security. And then like the Nuffle fast finale layer is more like it uses obviously some Near security because we're dumping everything to Near, but then it also uses like eigenlayer security, right? So it's kind of interesting model. So it's a like off-chain on-chain product that relies on Near plus Ethereum security. It's a very interesting design space. And then we basically started asking ourselves, right, like there's this restaking platform, Eigenlayer. There's another restaking platform that's popping up, which is Babylon. and you're seeing like Solaire popping up. You see like I think there's something in Near that's going to pop up. So every blockchain eventually will have their own restaking protocol, right? So, which is like Monad and Bera, like they're going to have their own restaking because it makes sense, right? It makes sense for yield, people that want to put their money that already sits and you want to just get more money out of it. And also, you can enable AVSs to do cool things. We started like saying, hey, obviously for the AVS that we're building, we're taking ETH, right? So like native ETH, to back the security up. And we started us like, why not take Near, right? So we basically said, okay, like maybe we should do something with Near, but a lot of the solutions you have is like you need to bridge the Near to Ethereum to put it onto eigenlayer. So we're building, like designing currently a unified security layer, essentially just saying, hey, AVS comes in and says, I want some Ethereum security and some Near security, but the prices of that is different because eventually, like the problem with this current restaking market is, nobody's paying anything at this point. And like there's going to be payments coming up in September where people have to pay for the Ethereum security that they get, which is going to be expensive for some applications, right? Or people might want to say, hey, like this is too expensive. I want some Ethereum security, but some Babylon, like some Near security to kind of back it up to drop my price. Or you can just say, hey, I want to be full on like just Ethereum and Bitcoin, which is like Babylon. So I want to get 50% ETH, 50% Babylon security. So it becomes this like almost like a not roll up as a service provider, but it's more like AVS as a service platform, right? So you aggregate security. It eventually, since we've built an AVS, we can actually make some modules available for folks to come in and build AVSs. So yeah, this is currently in development. Quite excited about it. It will probably help we'll feed security to our AVS as well, like maybe to Near as well. Like Near DA becomes almost like we also can get security from eigenlayer. So we'll build this module and eventually let other L1s that I know pretty much using will use like eigenlayer or Babylon to secure their blockchain. L2s that are using, I know, restake rollups that Outlayer has been talking about, they're using that. So essentially it becomes this tool that people can come in and grab security from.
And I want to explain what an AVS is and restaking, because I think the average person also doesn't understand that. Basically, it's the concept of like renting security from a blockchain. So think of like a layer 2 on Ethereum is different. It's built on top of Ethereum, and you can move assets from Ethereum into the L2, and you always have like this exit hatch. Like a true L2 has an exit hatch. So like if the people that were really bad on that L2 and tried to steal your money, they couldn't. You could just take it and move it back to Ethereum. So it's always like it's like a very strong connection to Ethereum. It is like very it's built on top of Ethereum. Where an AVS or restaking is renting the security of a blockchain. So it's like it's almost like underneath Ethereum in a weird way. So imagine you're saying, hey, I want to build a blockchain, but I don't want to bootstrap my own validator set. And these are the people that like secure a blockchain. And on Bitcoin, it'd be the miners, right? The miners secure Bitcoin. And you say, I don't want to have to set up that infrastructure. I just want to rent infrastructure that's already being used today. And so what if this validator for Ethereum could secure Ethereum, but also could secure something like the Nuffle fast finality layer or something else? And so an AVS would be something that rents security versus having its own. It's a lot cheaper for them, and it's a lot easier for them to get to market with some sort of idea, and they have less overhead, etc. And so what you're proposing is saying, hey, yeah, so Ethereum's renting a security, that's eigenlayer, and like Near is technically in a weird way renting its security with Near DA. So what if you built like a marketplace of marketplaces where you could aggregate all these separate security marketplaces into one thing? It's almost like in a weird abstract way, kind of like Polygon's AgLayer, but for like restaking.
Exactly.
And so that's cool. That's a really cool idea.
Yeah. So we started building that internally. So we actually released a blog post like 2 weeks ago. So it's coming up. That's still kind of development, but we're excited about it. We're super excited because I think we're gonna see we're gonna say the same thing with like restaking, just like we saw with liquidity, right? So it's gonna be like people need to plug into one platform and just wanted to use eigenlayer. What we're saying is like, well, if you want to be Bitcoin Ethereum aligned, because that's what people want to do sometimes, like, oh, you can use this platform. And by the way, like, this is an easy platform that you can just plug in and don't worry about everything else. We'll take care of it. Right. So that's kind of the thesis.
It's weird. There's all like almost like different versions of the internet is how I think of these things. Like when I think of things like the Aglair, the elastic chain or whatever, I think of those things as like internet of blockchains. And then what you're talking about is like an internet of security or an internet of restaking. And yeah, it's just funny to see all these different networks pop up, and then these networks, these super networks pop up, and you know,
yeah, I mean,
I don't know where it ends, but that's a
yeah. I mean, it's also the thing that like not everything needs a new blockchain. That's been our thesis from the start, right? Like thesis has always been, oh, you need DA? Near has good DA, so let's just grab that, right? Like then obviously we need some Ethereum security to finalize, like early finalize, let's say, blockchains. Ethereum has tons of security. Let's just take that and grab it, right? So it's always been this like, I mean, we didn't think about it when we're starting to build these projects, but eventually like the vision has always been a lot of people want to build blockchains. It's going to get fragmented. Let's just figure out the problems that this space is going to have. Let's just not build a new blockchain, because some people are actually building new blockchains to solve these problems too, which contributing to the problem. We're like, hey, wait a minute, we'll figure out these without actually building a new blockchain, right? So that's kind of been always the vision.
What imagine crypto maybe over the next 5 years. In your mind, where will we be like as a whole, as an industry, 5 years from now on the current trajectory that we're going?
Interesting. So in 5 years, that's 2029. We would have probably seen cycles, right? So that would have been, it's hard to answer. I would love restaking to be, so there, like at least there's some demand from not only crypto.
Well, let me throw a wrench in here. I want you to also envision, okay, because I've seen this multiple times, that like by 2027, 2029, we should have AGI. So I've seen this, and I know Near's working on like, hey, we want to code using AI and like vastly accelerate the ability to code and build these things. So imagine, like, in my mind, I'm thinking 5 years is the equivalent. The next 5 years will probably be the equivalent of like 3 or 4 cycles, like because of how fast things are going to get, right? Modular solutions, AVSs. Like we should accelerate pretty rapidly from here. So keep that in mind when you answer.
Okay. So if that's the case, like deploying a blockchain is pretty much like clicking a button. I think it's way cheaper than it is. I don't think it's $3,000 a month. I think it's like $50 a month, right? So that's probably going to be the case. Second is you still need a lot of developers, but developers aren't writing smart contracts. They're just checking that the smart contract does the good work. Eventually, maybe there's an AI model that actually checks it, and the only thing you just do is like, hey, like this looks good or not bad, and eventually start to. So the problem with this is like AI developers are a good idea, but there's a lot of like things that could go wrong with the current models. I think that will reduce, but you'll still see some hacks like, oh, this thing got hacked and it was developed by AI. But the human figured out another way to break it. Other things, I think there will be more stable coins. Like I think there's going to be, and the space needs like growth in sort of assets. The way to do that is through like real world assets, like people coming in. Like BlackRock was a good start. I think we'll have more and more like these kind of products that people buy in the real world, and it ends up like adding into blockchains. The other thing is, I mean, we're seeing this already. I don't want to say that, but I think there's going to be more and more involvement of crypto and blockchain in politics, because it's already a political tool, right? And it will become even more and more, more and more available in our society. But that's requires a lot of learning from the, common people. But yeah, those are some predictions.
Yeah, the hacks will be interesting, because if we have AGI, then you could have like an army of AGIs crawling through the code to find vulnerabilities. But also on the other end, you have like an army of AIs like making sure the code isn't vulnerable. Have you seen it's Zirkit? They've built like on their settlement. On settlement, it has an AI that like looks at it and says, hey, is this a hack or not? Like they took it through 2 years of machine learning to see like if a transaction looks like a hack or not. And if it is, it just pauses it. And it has to go through this process. I almost wonder if maybe that we might have solutions like that where AI is like pause things like, this looks a little suspicious. We'll take a look at it.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, we have these things kind of, right? Like in the internet as well. Oh, this looks like a suspicious link, and do you really want to click it, right? So that's kind of, I think we'll see that. But yeah, I hope like there's more, like there's going to be a lot of blockchains. I mean, we're seeing this, right? Like 40, 50, I think L2s. There's like, I was checking L2 beat, there's like 70, 80 more coming, and it's just going to go even nuts. I think it's going to be like 500 like L2s. Eventually will settle down somewhere, right? People don't want to launch L2s anymore. The incentives won't be there. But that's also an interesting, we will have a lot of blockchains. And that is like, people were saying that, people were saying that like a year ago, and now it starts to crystallize why people were saying that. Yeah.
What do you think are going to be some of the killer use cases, if you could guess, okay? Killer use cases of crypto. We're talking about, we've talked about infrastructure so far. In 5 years, what do you see? What are people doing on blockchains? Is it all finance? Or is there other things?
Yeah, I'm on the other side. I think it's all finance and speculation. But that's what my, everybody that uses blockchains currently use it for that reason, right? By the way, that doesn't undermine what blockchains are for. Like money's probably the biggest game that we all play. All of us play it, right? Every person in the world is supposed to play the money game. Like it is a simulation, right? So it's the biggest game that everyone plays. So it's a big market. And then financialization of things like Poly market is pretty interesting. I think we'll see more of these like fun, almost like you go to Poly market, you don't speculate on crypto. You kind of go there and have fun, right? Like, oh, my girlfriend and I have set them. It's like, oh, Polish elections, this guy's gonna win, right? So like, yes, it's kind of gamified in a sense. So we'll see more of these, and we see this like with fantasy. I think pumped up fun kind of similar too. Like you kind of speculate on memes, right? Like internet. So we see more of these apps. What else? Like I'm interested in what's gonna come out of AI crypto. My background, as I said, deep learning. There's still some education to be done for folks outside of crypto. Like when you go to a party in London, because Google DeepMind is here, and you tell them like AI crypto, and everybody was like, what the hell are you talking about, right? So it's like, versus if you start to talk about crypto to them, like people will still understand some things, like Bitcoin as a like digital gold. Some people in tech like educated themselves to understand crypto. But when you go to AI meetups with other folks that are actually like doing AI stuff at Google DeepMind, where by the way Transformers came from, like people are like, I don't know, I just didn't understand what you're talking about, right? So, but again, it's early, which becomes an opportunity for a lot of folks to kind of contribute and be an early riser in those fields. But that's how I see it. So I hope AI and crypto takes off, and I think like my bet has always been, I mean, Ilya has the both kind of worlds in a way, right? He knows some people he's very well known in obviously normal AI world, but also in crypto. So like those folks, I'll bet my bets on as somebody that can unify those two.
Okay, so you gave me a really just like strong mental model in my head, like talking. I want you to imagine AGI makes it so that the development of digital assets of any kind, digital media content of any kind is just like really quick, right? You want to code up a website, easy, done for you by an AI. You want, right now we already have pictures, we already have videos, but now imagine movies, TV shows, music. We already have music, but it just gets more and more insane, where like all these things that used to take humans a long time to put together and a lot of skill, it's like everyone could do it. And so we have this mass amount of media, content, websites, code, software, everything, right? And same thing with crypto, like tons of chains, tons of like experiments. And so everything just accelerates to like light speed essentially. And we have an abundance of this. And then imagine with blockchains and crypto, what it really does is it brings scarcity to the digital world, right? Like before in the digital world, there was no concept of scarcity outside of maybe domain names. But crypto brought scarcity to the digital world. Imagine those two worlds meshing together. I think maybe at the very least with AI, because it is accelerating everything, the only place you're going to find value is going to be in the crypto space, because even video games, like when video games are as quick as like, hey, putting in a couple prompts and you got the next Skyrim, popping up, at what point is that valuable anymore? But now imagine like digital economies where like there's actual value in these games, and if you work at them, there's scarcity and normal things that are in real life, where you're not just wasting your time. You can go out and you can collect things that have some sort of value and meaning. I don't know. I see maybe crypto, AI, and the future over this next 5 years really going hand in hand with those things and that concept of digital scarcity.
But the first thing AI will try to hack is crypto too. If you think about it, because data is available everywhere, right? So, I mean, not for memes for DA, but like actually, like code is available, you can read everything. So the first thing that I would attack if it was an HEI, that I know everything, because it's hard to communicate like with banks and others, right? Because like I don't know how to get in there, but it's quite interesting to think about. So, but yeah, because the other things are kind of like the governance of AI is quite interesting. I think like how do you govern that? I think that makes sense for just like for a normal governance of a country. I think it makes sense to do everything on chain. But let's see. I think the future will show how things will evolve.
Yeah, I think so too. Well, I guess I want to wrap this. I mean, I could go into AI and all day long. Like I keep thinking about, I read this whole thing about, like I mentioned, AGI coming 2027, 2029. There was this whole paper on Twitter. I don't know if you saw it. The whole paper on Twitter where the guy went into like the different of like development or whatever. And he was talking about by 2027, 2029, we should have AGI. And then at that point, you could have millions of essentially AGIs coding better and better AI. And it was his estimation that within 12 months, within a year, we would have some form of a super intelligence where like the intelligence of that thing would be so vastly superior to us that we'd be like, we're the equivalent of ants compared to like humans, would be our intelligence compared to this thing's intelligence. And I don't know, man, it's just got me thinking. Like, I really think in the next 5 years, the world will probably change more than it has in the last 10,000. And I don't even know if we can handle that. Like, I think society.
It's always been like that way, right? Like, it's always been like, if you look at the history, it's always like there's more developments in the last 100 years than like, I don't know, the other 100 years before, right? So it's always like this. So it's going to continue like that. My only problem is like the data that it knows is human data. So how could it pass humans in a way? I mean, it could do tasks better than everybody else does, right? Like single task. But there's still something interesting with humans that computers can't do, right? Like, I mean, maybe it changes. Maybe there's it requires, transformers aren't enough, right? It requires another breakthrough to happen. And you never know. Maybe we don't hit it. Maybe we hit it like a year later.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I always think about like, how does it know what to want? Because like we have like chemical reactions that tell us like want this, like these are hard coded into us, but it doesn't have that. So like how does it have even a desire for anything? Like is desire just purely like a organic thing that like we have, that like a computer could never have desire, therefore it'll just always be obedient? Like we always think of it wanting to take over the world or wanting to do this, but how can it even want? I don't know.
It just moves it takes the wants from humans.
Yeah, it inherits the wants from humans. That sounds scary. All right, cool. Well, this has been really great talking about this. I guess if somebody wants to learn more about Nuffle and what's going on, where would be the best place to go?
Yeah, we just launched. I mean, it's been a month now. So it's nuff.tech is the website. And Nuffle Labs is the Twitter. So we're just about to, our account was suspended. Now we got it back. So hopefully like pushing more stuff there, getting our yellow tick back. So like still taking some time, but yeah, you can go there or reach out to me on Twitter. I'm usually available. So yeah.